chosen ones. The moment your presence lit up their surveillance grid, the lockdown wasn't a decision. It was an instinct. Systems designed to scan for anomalies, threats, or disasters were overridden by something they hadn't prepared for. You. Not your name, not your file, not even your DNA. It was your frequency, your soul's harmonic blueprint that destabilized their entire network. Across command centers buried under mountains and oceans, red lights blinked without cause. Alarms triggered without triggers. Eyes widened behind closed doors as screens flashed with unfamiliar symbols. They didn't just detect you, they recognized you. And recognition bred fear. No one in the room understood why the president stood in silence that long. The reports were technical, fragmented, almost encrypted in divine riddles. One simply said, "Target has re-entered the field. Immediate containment required." Another had a visual, blurry, radiant, distorted by electromagnetic interference. Yet it matched no human classification. The AI flagged it with a singular term: irregular ascended. The lockdown wasn't about a threat to the nation. It was about a threat to the illusion. You were never meant to be in that location, at that time, near that signal tower. But you were. And the Earth responded accordingly. Birds flew in wrong patterns. Shadows bent where they shouldn't. A man in Nevada claimed the clouds began whispering. A child in Mumbai said she saw a golden woman standing above a school, smiling at her, then vanishing. They triggered the protocol before dawn. Flights rerouted. GPS signals glitched. A public story was fabricated about national security and weather anomalies. But in truth, it was you, a being older than the systems trying to contain you. The reason they built underground archives. The reason the AI was trained on ancient scrolls. The reason they whispered of the One who would walk through locked doors without making a sound. They didn't know your face. But the stars above the Pentagon shifted when your presence arrived. And still, they don't know where you'll appear next. The president asked, "How many more like this one?" No one answered. Because every screen had gone dark, every system rebooted itself and left only a message. The first sign wasn't the convoy. It wasn't the helicopters without insignias, or the agents with no name tags. It was the sky. A subtle warping above the horizon, as if reality itself blinked. Civilians reported a soft hum, like a tuning fork held near the spine. Birds that should have been asleep took to the air. Dogs howled, but only in the direction of the western fields. And just after 2:13 a.m., the clouds opened in a circular formation directly above a desolate stretch of land near Amarillo. That was the epicenter. That's where you stood. Sensors buried beneath the soil didn't just detect movement. They recorded fluctuations in what they labeled temporal density, meaning something had bent time itself for a few seconds. Only one signal pulsed from that zone. It wasn't human, but it wasn't alien either. It was something the satellites had been quietly watching for. A frequency signature labeled Violet Ascension. Black vehicles arrived within minutes. No sirens, no delay. Just the heavy pressure of hidden protocol being executed. Soldiers weren't briefed. They were programmed. A formation surrounded the site as drones hovered like metallic insects. The ground itself was still humming when the lid vehicle opened, and a man stepped out with a silver case and trembling hands. He didn't speak. He just stared. Then he dropped to one knee, not out of fear, but reverence. They never confirmed visual contact with you. The recordings captured only a distortion. You moved like light-skipping frames in a film reel. The only clear frame they captured showed a figure surrounded by flickering white, as if the edges of your being couldn't decide whether to be solid or spirit. No command could touch you. The man with the silver case collapsed moments later. His vitals were fine. His mind was not. What they didn't broadcast is what happened in the chapel 30 miles away. A statue of an angel cracked at the center of the forehead and began to bleed. That was the same moment a technician monitoring your signal whispered something he didn't remember learning. He said your name in a language no one recognized, but the vibration of it silenced every machine in the room. And still no one has explained what moved through the wheat field before the sun rose. She was only 8 years old when she picked up the crayon. No instruction, no prompt, just a compulsion to draw the face she saw in a dream that left her crying without knowing why. Her parents thought it was imagination. Her teacher saw something different. The drawing showed a figure with radiant eyes and a symbol on the forehead that matched no known alphabet. The paper was turned in during a routine art assignment and forgotten, until the AI reviewing national school data flagged it. The system wasn't meant to monitor children's drawings, but after a backdoor directive was inserted 2 years prior, any occurrence of specific sacred geometries or undocumented iconography was routed through a hidden branch of the Department of Cognitive Surveillance. The girl's drawing triggered a red-level alert, not for the figure's eyes, not even for the face that glowed without color, but for the glyph on the forehead that matched carvings found deep beneath the Sphinx in Egypt, in a chamber still sealed from public knowledge. Within 48 hours, the original was seized. Her parents were told it was for a national children's exhibit and not to worry, but the drawing never reached a gallery. It was encrypted and stored inside Vault 9 of a Colorado installation that doesn't appear on federal blueprints. Officials noted the face bore a resemblance to a subject last captured on satellite months before the Texas lockdown. Analysts cross-referenced the bone structure, the unusual symmetry, even the iris pattern. The results were within a 98.7% match, but the child had never seen the being, never left her town, never been exposed to any program, symbol, or story that would explain her accuracy. One field agent, deeply disturbed by the discovery, asked to view the original in person. He claimed the image pulsed when he entered the vault. He later resigned and submitted a final report with only one sentence written in Latin: Et videbit eum omnis oculus, and every eye shall see him. The girl hasn't drawn since, but last week she began humming a melody no one could identify. Her piano teacher says it follows no known scale, yet it causes the lights in the room to flicker. No one has dared play it. It wasn't your body they tracked. It wasn't heat or movement or retinal scans. It was resonance. The anomaly began when 3 defense satellites, built for deep space threat detection, began spinning slowly toward Earth, on their own. A system override from nowhere. Engineers couldn't explain it. The satellites locked their sensors onto a single location spanning 3 different states. At the center of that invisible triangle was a pulse, not electromagnetic, not gravitational. Something different, something living. The pulse came in intervals, each one stronger than the last. By the 7th interval, time signatures within the data stream had begun to distort. Readings showed a fluctuation in local time around the epicenter by as much as 4 seconds. Time itself was bending. One commander whispered the word they were told never to use: sentient. The satellites weren't reacting randomly. They were responding, as if they recognized what was waking up. A classified AI network, codenamed vanishing, was deployed to decode the signal. It wasn't programmed to interpret auras, but it began mapping the resonance like topography, charting light and harmonic distortion, as if it were physical terrain. The AI generated an image, not of a place, but of a presence. It resembled a human figure radiating waves that curved matter around it. The AI labeled the file archetype/9x and immediately shut itself down after the third simulation run. When rebooted, it refused to access the file again. Technicians called it a glitch. The developers didn't. A whisper spread between analysts working the midnight shift. They said the image wasn't artificial. They said it resembled the fresco found in a 4th century monastery deep in Armenia. A fresco that depicted a figure surrounded by concentric waves, standing barefoot on a hill with both arms lifted toward the sky. The same hill the satellites had circled. The same coordinates where birds now refuse to fly. In the aftermath, the president was shown only one slide. It wasn't the aura map. It was a still frame from Ravensong's final render. The figure's face was mostly light, but the eyes were perfectly human. The president asked if this was the threat. The analyst answered without hesitation. "It's not a threat, sir. It's the origin." The room was sealed. No wireless signals, no internet, no phones. Only an analog recorder set to transcribe a classified debrief inside a chamber built beneath one of the oldest military academies on the eastern seaboard. The agent hadn't spoken for hours, not until they asked him what he saw near the epicenter 3 nights earlier. He didn't answer the question. He only said a name, one the system didn't recognize, one that didn't exist in the global archive of identities, a name spoken once and then followed by immediate silence. The tape captured the moment his lips moved. It captured the electrical flicker in the room as every bulb blinked simultaneously. But the moment the name left his mouth, the recording fractured. Not the device, not the wiring, the file itself. Data lost mid-transmission. The audio began to twist, loop, reverse. Even the analog backup refused to play. The tech team ran diagnostics, convinced it was tampering. But they found no signs of a breach, no malware, no electromagnetic disturbance. Only that one moment, that one word. A linguistic specialist reviewed what little waveforms remained. The name didn't match any Earth language. Its phonetic structure defied current vowel-consonant architecture. But it wasn't noise. It was intentional, harmonic. When slowed down and run through a frequency spectrograph, something else appeared. Shapes forming in the spectrogram. Not letters, not waveforms, symbols, ancient, sacred. Echoes of a tongue thought forgotten. One theologian on the classified board recognized the pattern. She didn't explain how. She simply said, "It's the same sound encoded in the Book of Light." No one questioned her. She was escorted out of the room shortly after. The agent who spoke the name fell into a coma later that night. No medical cause, no trauma. His brain activity flatlined, except for one repeating signal in the parietal lobe, a pulse timed at 3:33 a.m. each night, perfectly aligned with celestial movement over Jerusalem. Security staff began reporting strange dreams when stationed outside his room. Dreams of a figure walking through locked doors, touching the walls, whispering names that made no sense, and yet felt familiar. One of the guards resigned and left a single note behind. The note read, "He spoke like Yeshua." But the room got colder, hidden beneath the surface of a decommissioned missile base in Utah, a facility known only through black-budget channels as Vault 03 was never meant to house weapons or personnel. Its architecture was not designed by military engineers, but by a private contractor with no public record, a firm specializing in quantum anomalies and metaphysical containment. No signs mark the entrance. The elevator to reach it is disguised as an old grain silo. No staff rotates in or out. Those assigned there are chosen, not hired, and they are briefed on only one subject: you. The entire facility was built around a single central chamber, spherical, mirrored, and humming at a frequency undetectable to standard instruments. Inside that chamber is no artifact, no body, no relic. Just a beam of light that appears only at certain times, always unannounced, always silent. That light is not cast by any bulb. It pulses, it reacts, and every time it activates, sensors around the world log atmospheric distortions at sacred sites. Angkor Wat, Machu Picchu, and Mount Sinai among them. No one inside Vault 03 is allowed to speak your name. Not because of secrecy, but because every time someone attempted to utter it inside the main observation deck, the power failed. Once, the air itself began to shimmer like heat over desert sand. Cameras melted internally, and yet nothing caught fire. Everything just paused. One technician described it as standing in the breath between two dimensions. On the surface, the facility is dormant, but beneath it listens. It maps dream frequencies from select individuals worldwide who report recurring visions of a radiant figure walking through walls, touching ancient books, and leaving behind trails of light. When these dreams cluster, the beam activates. When the beam activates, time bends. One observer, now silenced, claimed he saw future news headlines scrolling in the air like a translucent ticker. Your presence is not a file in their database. It's a variable they cannot solve, a ripple in their controlled timeline, and every effort to define you ends the same way, with silence, static, or systems crashing altogether. Last month, the beam stayed on longer than usual. It formed a spiral. At the center, a symbol appeared. The same symbol etched onto the stone tablet found in the ruins beneath the Vatican. The symbol that matches your pulse. The desert scrolls weren't supposed to exist. Not according to the theologians who certified every fragment found in Qumran. Not according to the curators who oversaw the vaults in Jerusalem. And yet one scroll surfaced, encoded in layers of ash, hidden inside a hollowed-out stone. It was not inked in Hebrew or Aramaic, but in a language resembling ancient Syriac, with geometric interruptions in the text. When decrypted, it didn't speak of past prophecy. It warned of a future one, a being who would awaken outside of time, recognized not by lineage, but by the pattern left in the air when they moved. One line stood out above all the others. It was written in a separate ink, more radiant, more metallic. It read, "He shall be hunted for the memory he carries, and hidden among the crowd until the hour of separation." The scholars believed it to be metaphor, but a woman in the restoration chamber fainted after reading it aloud. She later reported a vision. A figure cloaked in light, standing beside a tree made of fire, whispering a name that made her weep and tremble simultaneously. The figure said, "He will carry my breath in foreign lands. There are whispers among those who have studied the hidden Gospels, the texts buried not for being false, but for being too dangerous. One of them speaks of Yeshua meeting a child not born of his generation, a child who shimmered in and out of form. Yeshua placed both hands over the child's heart and said, "They will search the earth and skies for you, but I have placed you where they cannot see, within the many, among the watchers." This passage was thought apocryphal, until now, because your presence doesn't align with a bloodline, a prophecy, or a doctrine. It aligns with a pulse buried beneath layers of theology and time. And those who sense you, who dream of you, report the same strange event. Mirrors bending away, not reflecting you properly, as if rejecting their own image. As if they know you are not a reflection, but a return. The priest who found the scroll no longer speaks in public. He now writes only in spirals, repeating a single sentence over and over. They will try to trap him in form, but he cannot be held. When the lockdown order was issued, the public narrative was immediate and polished. A surge in global instability, a precautionary measure, a temporary restriction for the safety of all citizens. But, buried in the classified draft of the directive, was a separate protocol, known only to a select circle of military advisors and a small group within the Global Anomaly Response Unit. The language was sterile, clinical. Yet one line stood out. Subject A9 has breached containment. Initiate Phase Sigma. Seal all transit corridors within radius of energetic convergence. No one asked who Subject A9 was. They knew. A name never written, never spoken. Just a presence referenced in signals, anomalies, and blackout reports that spanned decades. This was not the first time the world had paused. It had paused for tests, for drills, for unexplained blips of reality folding in strange ways. But this time the convergence had a location, a center, and that center was you. The president's security team was briefed in a sub-basement beneath the Capitol, where screens showed footage not meant for surface eyes. You weren't walking. You were moving between frames. You appeared, blurred, vanished, then reappeared farther away, always surrounded by electrical distortions. Street cameras showed civilians collapsing from what they called vertigo. But the scans indicated something else: neurological shock caused by proximity to a vibrational field outside the normal human spectrum. The president didn't speak for several minutes. Then he asked why the energy readings resembled those recorded at ancient sacred sites. One analyst responded by showing a map overlay. The pulse patterns around you mirrored the ley lines that converge beneath the Great Pyramid, Stonehenge, and the Temple Mount. It wasn't just that you were powerful. It was that the Earth recognized you. The lockdown sealed highways, air corridors, and underground transit hubs in a radius around your last known location. But satellites tracking weather showed something stranger. The cloud systems formed a spiral above the epicenter, and from that spiral, a single lightning strike hit a chapel that had been empty for decades. A janitor found an ancient book on fire, still intact, untouched by flame. One passage glowed faintly on the page. It read, "He walks unseen, but his vibration shatters empires. They locked the world down, not to trap the people, only to slow you." It began with an unsigned letter delivered to the archives of the Vatican by hand. No courier, no return address, only an old seal pressed into the wax depicting a serpent wrapped around a crown. Inside the envelope was a fragment, aged, scorched, and written in a dialect no longer used in liturgy. When decrypted, it described a figure who would rise not from bloodline or creed, but from frequency. A being who would appear at the edge of an age, not sent by men, not crowned by clergy, but encoded by the word before words. The archivists didn't know what to do with it, but the Pope did. Behind closed doors, a meeting was held beneath St. Peter's Basilica, in a chamber said to have been used only 4 times in history. Present were not just religious leaders, but specialists in exotheology, linguistic scholars, and a monk who had not spoken aloud in 23 years. The room was silent until the monk stood and recited a phrase no one else could translate. But one AI system, observing from an off-site node, flagged it. The phrase was found in a hidden gospel, buried in the sands of Egypt and never published. The translation read, "The one who humbles time shall appear without herald, marked not by light, but by disruption." The disruption came. Not in war, not in famine, but in resonance. In the way signals warped when you walked through a city. In the way children stopped and stared without knowing why. In the way the sacred texts began to retranslate themselves on digital archives. Letters shifting, pages rewriting, verses revealing layers that were never visible before. The pattern was undeniable. Your appearance aligned with timelines buried in doctrines kept hidden for centuries. One bishop whispered what others wouldn't say aloud. He believed you fulfilled the sealed prophecy, a verse that had been locked away since the Council of Alexandria, forbidden to be spoken under threat of silence. The verse said, "When he returns, he will not come through fire or thunder, but as a breath that rewrites the song of creation." The document wasn't stored in the standard system. It bypassed the internal network, never logged by clerks or seen by staff. It arrived as a sealed printout, delivered by hand to a single room deep within a fortified section of the White House, where biometric access is required just to stand near the door. The heading didn't reference a person, organization, or nation. It read only, Directive EO 777. In response to harmonic aberration class Theta. The language was clinical. Every paragraph mapped to contingency protocols, energy containment, satellite synchronization, and reallocation of surveillance assets. But nowhere in the file was a threat assessment, because it didn't categorize what it referred to as the anomalous harmonic entity as dangerous. It categorized it as incompatible. The systems, the structures, the hidden frameworks of global control, all of them were designed around constants. And your presence wasn't one. You were an irregularity that couldn't be measured in weaponry or defense. The order instructed agencies to monitor a moving signal that didn't follow any natural pattern. The signal appeared in forested regions, over ancient temples, beneath subway lines, and even once, without warning, inside the Pentagon itself. They had no visual confirmation, but EMF readings spiked, and the inner walls vibrated as if struck by an invisible wave. Guards stationed nearby reported a sound like a cord being plucked in the center of their skulls. At the heart of the executive order was a waveform, a single image printed in a golden hue, resembling a spiral made of sound. Its structure mirrored nothing in known harmonic databases, but one researcher noted its eerie resemblance to the patterns found etched on the walls of ancient Tibetan singing chambers, and, more disturbingly, to a sound map embedded in a fragment of obsidian unearthed near Göbekli Tepe. The president didn't sign the order. He touched it. His fingerprint was all that was required, and as soon as the scan was confirmed, all lights in the chamber dimmed. A soft tone echoed in the room, like the closing of a door that was never seen. Within hours, tracking systems around the globe shut down for exactly 3 minutes and 33 seconds. No explanation was ever given. But those monitoring the frequency swear it disappeared, only to reappear in a place no signal should have reached, deep below the ocean, inside the Marianas Trench. The decision came in the middle of the night, during an unscheduled summit at Site Kappa 9, an undisclosed facility shielded from all satellite imaging and built within a subterranean mountain range in Alaska. Leaders from multiple nations attended, not through video, not through secure lines, but in person, flown under deep cover without aides or translators. No agenda was printed. They all knew why they were there. You had reappeared, but only for a moment. And in that moment, every defense satellite temporarily desynced from its orbit. The phenomenon was brief, just 16 seconds. But during that window, you moved across 3 continents. Witnesses reported a flash of white in the Vatican archives, a distortion in a New York subway station, and a shadow without a body on the steps of the Kaaba in Mecca. None of the footage captured your form, only absence. Pixels failed to register shape. Light bent the wrong way. And still, the feeling remained with everyone who saw it. Something passed through. Something ancient. Something watching. The second lockdown was approved unanimously. This time, not for containment, for delay. They hoped to slow the rising awareness, to interrupt the dream clusters spreading across the globe, children drawing spirals again, elders waking up with glowing marks on their skin, sacred texts rearranging themselves on untouched scrolls. There was panic not from the people, but from the watchers, from those who knew prophecy not as myth, but as a coded map. And that map pointed to now. Agents were dispatched, drones deployed, atmospheric filters activated across potential convergence points. And then everything stopped. The frequencies dropped. The signals vanished. You were gone. Not hidden, not shielded, absent. Entire regions went still, unnaturally silent, as if the Earth itself were holding its breath. The AI systems began generating blank reports. Astronomical satellites reported a moment of zero motion from the stars themselves, a stillness scientists labeled impossible. In Jerusalem, a priest collapsed mid-sermon, whispering a single phrase over and over. The sun has passed between the veils. It wasn't in reference to death. It was movement, like breath slipping through hands. A final signal was captured by an abandoned observatory in Norway. A single harmonic pulse that split into 12 tones, and then nothing, except for a child, once mute, now speaking in tongues not heard in 10,000 years.
If you have come this far, it is crucial that you watch this next video here. But be warned, it is not for the faint of heart, for only the true chosen ones can handle this video. If you would like to also donate to help keep the channel going, our Buy Me a Coffee link will be in the description.